Welcome to the Just My Mom Sense podcast. I'm not an expert, I'm just trying to figure out parenting, and in turn myself, while sharing things I've learned with all of you. Today on the Just My Mom Sense podcast, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Matt Zakreski. Dr. Matt is a clinical psychologist who specializes in working with neurodivergent kids and teens, gifted individuals, and their families. He's a speaker, published author, podcast host, and passionate advocate for inclusive approaches to mental health, education, and parenting. As some of you may know, I'm a big fan of the movie Inside Out, and when Dr. Matt made a post about the movie on LinkedIn, I knew we had to have him on the Dillo's Diz podcast. I'm so happy to have him on the Just My Mom Sense podcast to nerd out about neurodiversity. Thank you, Dr. Matt, for being a guest on the Just My Mom Sense podcast. Welcome.
Jen, I always like talking to you, so it's a treat for me.
I'm so excited. So for those of you who are listening and don't know Dr. Matt, can you talk about your background and where your passion for neurodiversity comes from?
So I'm a clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I wrote a book, started my own podcast. I basically do a lot of things in the neurodivergent space, people with different brains. So I grew up as a gifted kid, and I was diagnosed with ADHD in high school, which I always say explained a lot. And then I realized there was a lot of neurodivergent people out there who were just sort of navigating the world on like the hardest level of difficulty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they signed up for the teacups, but they're on Space Mountain.
Yeah.
I've got a metaphor for you, Jen. Don't worry.
I love it. I love it.
80% of the world is neurotypical.
Mm-hmm.
So the world is built for and by people who have different brains than the clients I see. So it makes sense that we'd be struggling, but there needs to be platforms and spaces and resources for parenting kids with different brains. And so I said, well, let me step into that space and try and be the ally and advocate I can.
That's awesome. I love it. If we start at the basics, can you, in a simple way, I don't know if that's possible, just explain what is neurodiversity?
So neurodiversity is the whole experience of human different brains, right? Neurodiversity breaks into two categories. There are neurotypical brains that basically do what we would expect a brain to do, right? They function within normal limits.
Yeah.
Then you have neurodivergent brains, brains that are different in a measurable way in both form and function.
Mm-hmm.
So the shapes and the quantity of the brain structures and also how they work. And this is really important because things like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, OCD, these are things for a long time, for lack of a better information, they were blamed on either the kid or the parent, right? For a long time for autism, it's like refrigerator moms, right? Mothers that are cold and withholding create autistic children. Yeah, that's not there. That's just hot garbage. That's not anything, right?
Yeah.
ADHD is too much sugar. You let your kids watch those Saturday morning cartoons, and now look what's happened to them, right? Now that we can see more nuance in the brain, we're understanding that these are literal measurable differences, right? So I can point to a brain scan and say, here's what an ADHD brain looks like. Here's what an autistic brain looks like. Here's what a gifted brain looks like. And then we realize that the behaviors that are flowing from that different brain are a manifestation of a biology, not a behavioral choice.
Right. And it is crazy. We grew up in a similar time where those kids at school were the bad kids and had the behavior problems. Yeah.
They had to go to the special room that was down the hall. Like, what do they do down there? Like,
right. 1,000%. So when my son was younger, he had a speech delay. And I remember thinking, do we give it time? Do we see how it goes? Of course, you have the outside sources too, especially those in the older generation. He'll talk. Don't worry about it. Just give it some time. Eventually got him evaluated and he started speech therapy and started talking pretty quick after that.
Amazing.
Yeah. But there was that like hesitation and doubt and what do I do? What's the right move? Now, I know neurodiversity is different, but I think there is still a hesitation for parents for their child or even adults for themselves, because I think we're also in a time where way more adults are getting themselves evaluated and realizing things about themselves. So, what is your advice of where to start if you suspect yourself or your child might be neurodiverse?
The first place you start is by talking to somebody like me. And there are a lot of neurodivergent affirming providers out there. And, you know, when we think about, if we're going to go off vibes for a
Hmm.
second here, right? If you could sum up the neurodivergent experience in one thing, is that easy things are hard for us and hard things are easy for us,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Like your kiddo with the speech delay, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't sit there like a bump on a log,
No.
right? They showed advanced skills in other areas.
Oh,
Because we
yeah.
talked about this a little bit before, right?
Hmm.
Right. What was their advanced skill? The thing that popped out like
He,
a
I mean,
mountain.
he knew letters and letter
Yep.
sounds before
Yep.
being able to talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, from a neurodevelopmental perspective, that is remarkable. That is an
Yeah.
unusual thing,
Yeah.
right? I see a lot of kids who develop asynchronously like that.
Hmm.
Kids who are slow to walk,
Hmm.
but are also can like scoot over to the map, be like, that's Uzbekistan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the Maldives. I'm like, I don't even know
Right.
what a Maldive is. Is that what I put on salad? I um so that's the so like when you see those sort of things, that's pointing us in the direction of neurodivergence, right? That,
Mhm.
because like listen, everybody struggles, but like most people struggle with the same things,
Yeah.
right? But when you're like, oh, I can do calculus in my sleep, but
Hmm.
I've never turned in a piece of homework on time ever,
Yeah.
that's when you start thinking, oh, I'm neurodivergent, right? And what we need is then to sort of explore that, right? Because there are diagnostic labels we can put on that. The big four are autistic, ADHD, gifted, and dyslexic, right? Those are sort of the four I see most often in my practice. And they all have different rates that we see. But the idea is that a diagnosis does two things. One is it opens the door to services, right? I can
Mhm.
say, okay, I'm an ADHDer, so I can get accommodations at work through the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah.
What it also does from like a personological perspective is that it gives us a word for what's happening that
Hmm.
isn't, it's my fault.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And parents are saying to me like, well, I don't really want my kid to be labeled. I'm like, you're
Hmm.
right. And there are people who weaponize labels. Let's
Yes.
not pretend that's not the case. But I always tell parents, like, before I was labeled as a gifted ADHDer, I had labels anyway.
Hmm.
Labels like slacker
Yeah.
and doesn't work to his potential and scatterbrained.
Hmm.
Right. The world is going to label our kids anyway. We might as well give labels that can empower or give access to things
Yeah.
rather than labels that sort of speak to this is somehow your fault, Jen.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. No, it's so true. And I hear that a lot from other parents of the idea of labels. And I've seen other parents through my son is about to be 11, so in the last 11 years, coming across different parents, and no shame to them because I know it's a hard thing, especially in the time we grew up in. It's like this weird balance, but really be hesitant to get an evaluation done or worry about what a label may mean. And I think at this point in my life, I'm always like, I think it's a good thing, and I think it is empowering, and it can help you understand, wait, why do I go from 0 to 60 in my brain and start spiraling when this, what may seem to other people, this small thing just happened, but it's a bigger thing. And so for me, I'm always like, well, you should try to give your kid as many tools as possible because it can only benefit them, especially if they understand how their own brain works.
And that's exactly it, right? And so much of this is about finding communities that understand and support us,
Yeah.
right? And, you know, if you're walking down the street and you're wearing a counting down the days till my next trip to Disney shirt, and another grown-up stops you on Fifth Avenue and goes, I'm sorry, wait, are you a Disney adult too? And you're like,
Yeah.
yes, I am. Then there's instant synergy, right?
Yeah.
Connectivity is
Hmm.
off the charts.
Right.
And it's not dissimilar to being neurodivergent, right?
Hmm.
It's like if this is a school that supports kids who learn like this, you don't have to walk your kid into that school and spend 3 hours meeting with the head, with the principal and the guidance counselor. Like, here's what my kid is. Here's how they learn. Here's how they do. Here's what they struggle with. They have sensory needs. They have behavioral needs. All these things. If
Yeah.
you go to a school that's like, yeah, we get that. 99% of the kids here are like that. You're like,
Yeah.
right? Because you're skipping to chapter 11, not
Right.
starting by opening the book.
Right.
Right. So
Exactly.
that shared understanding and community, what it does is it raises the floor so we can also raise the ceiling.
Yeah, and I think in schools, there is still kind of the mix of talk when it comes to autism, ADHD from kids. I think kids can maybe hear some things at home or wherever they're getting them and, and put a negative connotation to it. You do a lot of work in schools now, which I really want to hear more about. What are you seeing when you're in the schools, and how are you approaching your talks with the students?
So let let's use an analogy. Jen, what kind of computer are you using today?
Mac.
Okay. So usually when I'm at home, I use a Mac. I'm on
Mhm.
the road, so I'm using a PC. Do you know why I'm using a PC while I'm on the road?
Why?
Because when you plug into the AV systems in these conference centers, 95% of them are PC friendly.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So I could absolutely use my Mac, and I've got the dongles and all the connectivity deals, right? You can make it work.
Yeah.
It's less effective, it's more work,
Hmm.
right? Now, no one is going to say that a PC is better than a Mac or a Mac is better than a PC.
Yeah.
They have different strengths and different weaknesses for different things. So what I tell schools, but more importantly, what I tell kids is like, it's just a different operating system,
Hmm.
right? There are things I would absolutely use my Mac for,
Yeah.
right? My Mac is really good at visual processing, right? When I'm on Canva, I'm using my Mac,
Yeah.
right? But like this PC is really good. It's just the connectivity is so much easier, right?
Yeah.
It's just an HDMI plugin, done, moving in. Right, we're
Hmm.
about the same age. Remember, like when you had to do like the red cord, the yellow
Oh,
cord, the
yeah.
white cord,
Yeah.
right? It's like a miss me with that
Yes.
nonsense. Yes, we are dating ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can tell you about the modem sounds too if you'd
Yeah,
like that.
right. You have to
Yeah.
put the VCR on channel 3 if it was
Yeah.
going to
Of
work. Like
course. Yeah.
blow in the video game cartridge,
Always. That's
right?
the perfect solution.
No kid has understood a word we said in the last
No.
2 years. It's great. Um, so that's the thing. It's like the whole point of the neurodiversity movement
Yeah.
is that differences aren't deficits,
Hmm.
right? And that's fundamentally what this is all about, is that if you've got a Mac, then let's put you in a Mac friendly environment.
Hmm.
And then your Mac doesn't feel like a burden, it feels like an advantage.
Yeah.
Right? There are things ADHDers want to do that are amazing personally, professionally, interpersonally,
Hmm.
romantically. Like, that's great.
Yeah.
I want my ADHDers planning parties and doing events. I want them on TikTok. I
Yeah.
don't know if I want an ADHDer doing my taxes, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing. It's if we look at this from a place of what are your strengths and how do I point you in that direction,
Hmm.
then it allows everybody to be the most successful version of themselves.
Yeah. So when you are speaking at schools, are you kind of just speaking? Are you doing workshops? Are you getting, I would suspect, knowing you, that you're getting the kids involved? How does it look when you're in the school?
Yeah, I mean, there are three legs of the stool, right? There's the teachers, the parents, and the kiddos, right? And I was just out in rural Colorado doing a workshop for all these gifted kids, and we just played a lot of social emotional learning games. And the kids were just vibing. It was awesome. I mean, they were bouncing off each other, they were learning from each other, and it was so cool, right? I love that stuff. In
Hmm.
the evening, and then I talked to the kids' parents, and it was a different sort of thing because parenting is more top down, right?
Hmm.
Here are the strategies that are going to help you connect with your kid and manage your kid and do the things your kid needs,
Yeah.
right? So, but kids have those three environments, right? They've got school, they've got home, and then they've got themselves,
Hmm.
right? So the more I can amplify the good things about those environments, the better everybody does.
Yeah.
What I tell every school I work with is that everybody in this building is working hard, right? I don't
Hmm.
know a single teacher and I don't know a single parent who doesn't work hard, right? But the problem is sometimes we're working hard from a place of misinformation, which means we're working harder than we have to.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, if what do they call it at Disney? Is it Fast Pass?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like
Well, now it's
Magic
Genie
Chat,
Plus. Who knows what
right?
it's called
Genie
now?
Plus, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why wait in line
Yeah.
for Tiana's Frog Palace
Yeah.
when you can get the Genie Plus and
Right.
go to the front line? You still have to wait, but you're waiting smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And there are not that many things in life where we can get those cheat codes, but if it exists, right? I mean, that makes everybody's job a lot easier. And that's always what I'm in the business of doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and like what you'll see is when I talk to schools, like I'll tell you to school, like, if you knew this thing about this kiddo, you would teach them differently. Like, absolutely. It was like, well, let me tell you how this kid's brain works and why they're showing up this way.
Yeah.
Because people always say knowledge is power. I prefer to say knowledge is empowerment. Right? The more you know, the better you can do.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's really what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard for teachers because they have a classroom full of 20 plus kids who have different brains that are all working differently, and they need to teach this one way of doing math or whatever it is, and it's tough for them. But yeah, to try to make those connections is important. I know you mentioned autism, ADHD, OCD, gifted. There's a lot of overlap there, but then sometimes there can be just one of those things. How often are you seeing more overlap than not?
And that's such a great and such a nuanced question. I
Mhm.
really appreciate it. It's Psychology was built off the medical model. And the problem with the medical model is very discrete.
Yeah.
If you have a broken ankle, you have a broken ankle.
Hmm.
If you have pneumonia, you have pneumonia.
Right.
The brain is very different. The brain is almost quantum
Hmm.
in how it functions, which means things like, so we've just had ADHD as a thing. It's a pattern of dysfunction in the prefrontal cortex.
Hmm.
Well, that can come from all sorts of things. That can come from brain injury. It can come from anxiety. It can come from giftedness. It can come from autism,
Hmm.
right? What do we call ADHD? Well, it's the prefrontal cortex isn't doing its job,
Yeah.
right? So one neurodivergence predicts other neurodivergences at a much higher level. So there
Hmm.
are people who are out there who just as it were, walking around with
Yeah.
dyslexia, right? I'm dyslexic. That's how my brain works. The end.
Yeah.
Right. But what the research shows is that increasingly, one brain difference predicts other brain differences. And there are people out there who are just rolling the one thing. But the
Hmm.
more we get under the hood, the more we realize, like, no, there's actually a lot more complexity to this, right?
Yeah.
And this is where the medical model falls short, because if you have pneumonia and I'm like,
Hmm.
here's this antibiotic, take the antibiotic for pneumonia,
Yeah.
we're done,
Right.
right? It's because your lungs are like, we're only looking at the one thing,
Hmm.
but it's a global perspective when we're thinking about the brain.
Right. So if a child or adult is in front of you, how do you even go about figuring that out and figuring out if there's an overlap or if it's just one?
So I do a lot of diagnostic work in my
Hmm.
in my job, and usually I'll do a full psychoeducational evaluation. I'll do an IQ test.
Hmm.
I'll do an achievement test. I'll look for ADHD, autism, anxiety, and then I do a nonverbal intelligence test as well. Because in living here in the West, we're a very verbally loaded culture,
Hmm.
right? But there's a lot of people who say like English isn't their first language, or people who are speech delayed, or people who just don't express their thoughts with words very well.
Hmm.
So we miss a lot of bright kids, bright
Yeah.
people, really,
Mhm.
whose brains work in that very technical, nonverbal space. But we miss them because we expect in our culture for people to be able to say the things they do really well, really well.
Hmm.
Part of the reason, right, that your Steve Jobs and Bill Gateses and Mark Cubans have been so successful is that they had these beautiful nonverbal ideas, but they can express them verbally very well,
Yeah.
right? And that's where you become the face of that company, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, I can't tell you how many times I've done an IQ test on a kid and their verbal skills are fine. But
Yeah.
when you look at their pattern recognition, their ability to problem solve, they're off the charts,
Hmm.
right? But since we expect a lot of verbal interplay in our classrooms and in our communities,
Yeah.
the kids who have less to say get seen subconsciously as less smart,
Right.
right? And we want to make sure those kids get a seat at the table too.
Yeah, for sure. And it is so easy, especially with how important testing has become at schools over the years and state tests and all the things.
I'm,
Exactly. I have my own anxieties from my own time with state tests. And you see the kids, I mean, they're for us, we're in New York, they start in third grade, the state tests, and you see the kids immediately feel like the pressure of it and having to try to balance at this stage in the game, third to sixth gradish or so, that they're not holding the child back from advancing in grades or anything like that. It's more about the school and the teacher at that point. But to try to explain that to the child taking the test when they're stressed out and are thinking this determines who they are in some way, it's so tricky to be like, try your best. Also, it kind of doesn't matter. It does matter, but it does, it's so hard.
and I mean, and the thing that's so important to tell parents and kids is that none of these things were handed down from on high. These are things we chose that mattered,
Yeah,
right? Like, can I get super nerdy and nuanced for a second here?
of course.
So when I do an IQ test,
Hmm.
right, the most common one for kids is the WISC, the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children.
Yeah.
And it pulls out a full scale IQ score, FSIQ.
Hmm.
And it comes from verbal intelligence, nonverbal reasoning, problem solving, working memory, and processing speed.
Okay.
Right. I'm going to focus on the last two for a second, working memory and processing speed. Those are things that we have decided have something to do with intelligence.
Hmm.
There are theorists out there who think that's not true
Right.
or less true. So when I calculate the IQ score, I calculate that with the working memory and processing speed, but there's also a way to calculate it without those things.
Hmm.
So I always present both numbers because it's the sort of thing. What's the easiest accommodation to give a kid at school? More time for their work and to make sure you email the homework home.
Right.
Working memory and processing speed covered.
Hmm.
Because what's like we decided being able to do the work quickly matters.
Yeah.
Who the hell thinks like if you're going out to dinner, do you want the cook slapping a steak on the grill and throwing it at you?
Right.
You want them to take the time to cook it properly,
Hmm.
right? But it's like this very Western idea. It's like it's got to be done well and it's got to be done fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you've got a kid who's a deep thinker, whose gears grind very finely, I want that kid to have a seat at the table too,
Hmm.
because those are the kids who are our introverts, right? There
Yeah.
are deep thinkers. It tends to be more women, right?
Yeah.
And people assign female at birth, right? It's like if you're socialized to think deeply and speak slowly, a lot of society is going to listen to you less.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose your ideas.
And I think about when I was growing up that, especially now being a mom and going back again and going, huh, I wonder,
Hmm.
I wonder if I had just had some more time for a test, would that have changed how I felt about tests, the grades I got on tests, and all the things? But again, 90s kids were not were not given those opportunities but also I don't think there was enough knowledge around it for parents and sometimes teachers, again, going back to that bad behavior, those bad kids or whatever it was, or oh, you're just not good at homework, you're just not good at tests, and you kind of just keep skating on by to get through school. I'm happy to see there seems to be a little less of a stigma around it. I think we still have a ways to go. But, I know that you are, and you mentioned earlier that you're big on reframing the idea of challenges and strengths. Can you speak more to that? Because I think especially in a school environment, kids are like, this is hard, this is easy. And not really seeing that sometimes the hard things just might take a little bit more time for you to feel comfortable with. But yeah, can you speak more to that?
I mean, for a lot of kids, I mean, we live in increasingly an instant access society, right? So a lot of kids don't have that second gear, whereas if I don't get it immediately, I don't know what to do,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna make another 90s kid reference here. Do you remember those Magic Eye books,
Oh, yeah.
right? Now, I couldn't do the soft focus, move the thing away, but I realized that if you cross your eyes, you can match two of the images, and when you
Uh-huh.
match the images, then you get the depth,
Right.
right? But it
Yeah.
took time to futz around with that and figure out like how that strategy worked for me,
Yeah.
right? When you look, it's like I don't see it, I quit, I'm done.
Yep.
Throw the book in
Yeah.
the river.
Yeah.
Set it on fire. You know?
And I just tell you, you're like a mind reader just as I know. I randomly thought about those posters yesterday and how my parents like had one hung up in the house. And I was like, that was weird that they had that. I don't know what made me think of that.
It is, everything old is new again.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but yeah, it cracks me up that it becomes sort of this sort of thing where like if you can teach a kid to get through that next section,
Hmm.
so many things open up to them,
Yeah.
right? And so in my line of work, we call this the 2-minute mountain.
Hmm.
The first 90 seconds of doing something is the hardest,
Yeah.
right? So if you go for a run, the first 90 seconds of your run are the hardest,
Yeah.
right? If you're sitting down to do your taxes, the first 90 seconds of doing your taxes, sending emails,
Yeah.
getting ready to call your mother, right?
Yeah.
Like those things, the first 90 seconds are the hardest.
Right.
So I tell my kids, if you can get through the first 90 seconds, if you climb that 2-minute mountain,
Hmm.
it doesn't get easy, but it gets easier,
Yeah.
right? So I tell my kids, like, you may not get this right away,
Yeah.
but if you can navigate that first 2 minutes of, oh my God, 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 then like you're gonna find your body like regulates to the challenge.
Right.
Most people can't survive those 2 minutes, right? Surviving those 2 minutes is a skill,
Yeah.
right? So let's build it. Because so much of the messaging kids get about success
Mhm.
is that it's a thing that you have or you don't have,
Yeah.
right? So we have to push back on that intentionally with this idea of that hard work will get you just as far,
Hmm.
you know, and you may not have the same ceiling as somebody else,
Yeah.
right? There's certainly natural skill, it can raise the floor,
Yeah.
but hard work can absolutely get you to the top as long as you've got the skills and the time to do so. And
Hmm.
that's a systemic intervention as much as it is a personal one. Because if
Yeah.
the school or the job or the workplace or the relationship isn't giving you the time to build those skills,
Hmm.
then it almost doesn't matter that if you're trying to build them because they're not going to give you the time to do
Right.
it. We are all works in progress, but we've got to honor the time it takes to make progress.
Yeah. What do you say to parents that might feel that they don't think their child's school is being supportive enough? They may have an IEP, but it's not really being followed, or they might feel their child needs even more, but the school isn't being responsive with that. Because I do hear that happening pretty often.
And really it comes down to it's a money game, right? I
Hmm.
mean, IEPs are contracts, and
Yeah.
the idea is that I have to educate this kid a different way for this kid to get their needs meet, to get what we call FAPE, right? Or
Hmm.
free access to public education. Now, not all FAPE is created equal.
Hmm.
So, if you're a kid who needs an extra 5 minutes to do their homework assignments, well, that's easy for the school to do. If you're an 8-year-old who needs to take high school calculus, that's a lot harder to do,
Right. Hmm.
right? But the schools don't want to fully implement those things because if they are found to fall short, then your right as a parent is to ask the district to send your kid somewhere else where they can be taught,
Hmm.
right? We call this an out of district placement. And there are several, I wouldn't even call them cottage industries, but there are professionals that exist, right? Education attorneys, education advocates, people
Hmm.
like me, I'm often asked to serve as expert witness in these sort of things.
Hmm.
Like, but really, like we're trying to set this up to give this kid the best access to education we can. If we can do that in the school through the creation of a good plan and following that plan, because the adherence to the plan matters more than how good the plan is.
Yeah.
Then great, let's keep them there, right? But Jen, you're in New York City. Like, do you have family in other parts of the country?
A little bit here and there.
So, like, let's say you've got family in Kansas,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, we want better pizza in Kansas.
Yeah.
So you could hop on a plane from LaGuardia, fly out to Topeka,
Yeah.
and you could teach them how to make proper pizza,
Yes.
right? And do all these things and build the oven and do all this stuff. But at some point, isn't it just smarter and easier to just fly them from Topeka to New York City?
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like the question we're often getting to here is, guys, if we are bending ourselves over, if we're tying ourselves in knots, trying to educate this kid the right way, at some point, it's not actual public school anymore, right? It is a specialized enough thing that this kid needs an environment that specializes in how this kid learns.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not a failure on anybody's part.
Right.
It's an acknowledgement that it's like the medical field, right? There's some things your general practitioner can do, and there's some things you need to see a specialist for.
Right.
Right. We just want to make sure that we can have access to those specialists for the kids who need it.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point. Sometimes I feel like it's so overwhelming, and I would love for there to be yeah. Not sometimes it's overwhelming, but I would love for there to be information out there, and it's getting better, but for parents to be like, what do I do? Like a good checklist of like, here's what you do and here's the path you go down. Because it can be just so many different things to think about and try to figure out when to talk to the school, when to talk to a pediatrician, when to talk to a specialist. There's all these weird paths, and everyone sometimes has a different opinion, and it can be crazy. I know that you mentioned anxiety earlier. Anxiety is represented on my shirt right now. Anxiety and I are good friends. There's definitely an overlap with anxiety and neurodiversity. How do you go about recommending tools for kids who have those big feelings, including anxiety, including some others, or maybe their go-to is to run and hide, their go-to is to cry. Either way, those big feelings are coming out one way or another.
So we don't want to run and hide from our feelings, right?
Yeah.
What happens is that we spend a lot of time trying to fight off our feelings. And our feelings are essentially automatic, right? They just occur, right? So instead of inside out, let's talk about inside out too, right? Riley tries really hard not to be anxious.
Yeah.
To the point to where she has a panic attack.
Yeah.
Right. So what I tell my kids is that instead of fighting off feeling this feeling, now nobody wants to feel anxious. Nobody wants to be angry. Nobody wants to be depressed.
Yeah.
Right. But the sooner you acknowledge that emotion, then you are spending less energy fighting off a thing you can't fight off and more energy making space for it. Right. So the analogy I often use, we're recording this and it's May and soon it will be properly summer. Like imagine you're in a pool, Jen, and I ask you to hold a beach ball under the water. The beach ball represents your big feelings.
Yeah.
Right. Now, it doesn't matter how strong you are, because what's that beach ball going to do the second you let go?
Oh, yeah. Pop right up.
Right. So now, not only have you failed at your task, but you've also gotten splashed as the ball came out of the water. Right.
Yeah.
So you failed twice. Congratulations. Right. And while you're sitting there holding that beach ball under the water, you can't engage in the pool party. If someone's like, yo, have a hot dog, you're like, I can't, I'm holding this beach ball under the water. Would you like to get out of the pool and do this dance party with us? I can't, I'm holding the beach ball under the water. Right.
Yeah.
If you have the discipline to let the beach ball go and let it float around the surface of the water, yes, it will move about. And that's scary.
Yeah.
But then you realize how much more you're empowered, because then you can get out of the goddamn pool.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Like you can swim away. You can swim away. But that's the thing. It's like, it's not about stopping the feelings. It's about changing our relationship to them. Right. And, for kids, it's like nobody wants to feel this way. So, but it isn't about not feeling this way. It's like, okay, I've made space for it. Now that I've changed my relationship, what can I do? Right?
Yep.
You may not want there to be a thunderstorm, but not wanting there to be a thunderstorm doesn't make the thunder and lightning go away. Acknowledging that it's there frees you to do something about it.
Yeah. So when I was 18, after I graduated high school, I was like, there's something going on with me. I don't know if it's anxiety. I don't know if I'm depressed. Something's going on, and I think I should figure it out and talk to my parents. And luckily, saw a psychologist and all the things. I think there is sometimes still a stigma with older generations understanding that kids have big feelings, that anxiety is a thing, that neurodiversity is a thing. What kind of support tools do you say that parents or teachers or anyone else can use so that their kids feel supported in having those feelings and being who they are so that hopefully they can then turn into their own advocate? And I know it's a lot easier said than done. I'm in, sensory processing groups on Facebook, and I see people talk about it all the time where even sometimes their spouses, sometimes their mothers or fathers are like, this is not a thing. You need to just be doing XYZ or ignore it and he'll grow out of it or whatever it is. And it would be so great if more could just be supportive and have this community around them.
No one is going to know more about your life than you,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? And when I take on a new client, I always say, you're the expert of you.
Yeah.
And I know all the psychology stuff. If we meet in the middle, we both win,
Yeah.
right? So these are the sort of things. I mean, we set these boundaries all the time.
Hmm.
This is how I am pursuing this. You can support me or you
Hmm.
can shut up,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Hmm.
And, I mean, I'm very active on social media,
Yeah.
right? And when I post things, most of the time people are very kind. Sometimes people say some really heinous things to me.
Hmm.
Now, there was a time where I would engage. I would be like, well, no, 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 because I have information, I have
Right.
knowledge. I will bend you to the will of my brain.
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, I've known you for 3 minutes and I haven't liked any of them. I'm not taking homework from you.
Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
if your uncle at Thanksgiving's like ADHD, this generation is too coddle, it's like, I'm not having that conversation with you.
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
not mean. That's the thing. You can keep talking. I will not engage with you on this conversation.
Yeah.
You are not in this like I am. You are not living this the way I am living it. You don't have to get it, but you have to respect it. And if you don't choose to respect it, you can get out of my way.
Yeah.
And frankly, this wings back to our conversation about how to talk to the school.
Hmm.
This is why you need a team of super friends. This is
Yeah.
why you need, it's not just Mickey, it's the whole gang.
Yep. Yep.
There are things that Daisy has her mallet, which I
Yeah.
love that, by the way. I love that they gave Daisy a mallet. Like, like there are things Daisy can do that Mickey can't do.
Yeah.
Right? You need a squad.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when I say to parents, it's like, let me be the asshole.
Yeah.
We're
Hmm.
talking to PS 113,
Yeah.
and like you've got two other kids in the district.
Hmm.
It's hard for you to be like fire and brimstone. But I mean, like, listen, this is what this kid needs, guys. I'm an expert. I'm a
Yeah.
fancy doctor man, right?
Yeah.
And I've literally told me, it's like, if you're going home for Thanksgiving and that uncle is going to start talking about it, you're like, listen, just listen to Dr. Matt's podcast, right?
Yep. Yep.
Like, is it, well, I'm here talking to you. That's great, but you're clearly not listening to me,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? And we cannot throw good energy after people who are playing dirty pool, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I will have a genuine conversation with anybody. I
Yeah.
am true, like I I've changed some hearts and minds. I've learned a lot from people I don't agree with, as long as the conversation comes from a place of authenticity,
Hmm.
right? But if you're being disingenuine about that conversation, then miss me with it, because
Right.
that's the sort of thing that actually hurts us and burns us out a lot faster.
Yeah.
So, block, ignore, move on with your life.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a big difference between coming across as curious and coming across as judgmental.
Ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding, right? You know, and and actually I would tell all the parents out there, use that language.
Hmm.
Like if you are genuinely curious about our journey with sensory processing disorder, I'll
Yeah.
talk to you about it.
Yeah.
But if you start telling me what to do, I'm going to end the conversation
Yeah. Hmm.
because unsolicited advice is always criticism.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You know,
Parenting a child, many children who are neurodiverse can be a roller coaster for parents. And there's a lot of, there's joy in all of it. There's a lot of exhaustion. There are days at the end you could feel mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted. How do you help those parents, or what tips do you have for those parents?
so there's this great book called Leaders Eat Last,
Hmm.
right? And the thing that really shook me about that book is that leaders eat last, but they still eat.
Hmm.
As parents, we are so quickly to put other people first that we don't save room for us, right? If there are five people in your family and you order a pizza and everybody gets two slices of pizza, I'm not a math guy, but I'm pretty sure there's no slice of pizza left for you.
Right.
Right?
Hmm.
So leaders eat last, but they have to eat, right? So, we know as parents, we're only as happy as our unhappiest kid, right? But that means that when we've done as much as we can do that day, we have to do something for ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And the problem with this whole self-care movement
Hmm.
is that it misses the point. Self-care reads like selfish,
Hmm.
right? And it also reads as a personal failing if you can't give yourself the self-care. Gee, Jen, why aren't you getting your nails did?
Right.
Jen, why aren't you booking yourself a aren't you taking your self-care seriously, Jen?
Hmm.
When we say self-care, what we really mean is community care.
Hmm.
Can you drop your kids off with a trusted adult for an hour so you can get a blowout?
Yeah.
Can you go to a restaurant with a trusted friend so you're not trying to manage your three children running around a Denny's
Hmm.
by yourself, right? Those are things because sometimes taking care of ourselves as parents isn't adding something as much as we'd like it to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's limiting stress and distress,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you give yourself permission as a parent to see it both ways, you're going to realize that the barrier to entry is a lot lower than you think,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes my wife and I will be like, all right, we just need to divide and conquer this thing. Like you'll do this with this kid, I'll do this with this kid, and we'll meet back here in an hour,
Hmm.
right? Because trying to do it all together it's just too much rigmarole.
Yeah.
So the the most dangerous words in the English language are, we've always done it this way.
Hmm.
As parents, it behooves us to sit down and like, are there better ways we can do this thing?
Yeah.
Right. And maybe there aren't. Maybe taking your kid to the dentist is always going to be tough,
Yeah.
but there are ways to improve the vast majority of things. And if we can reframe our thinking around them, you'll be surprised at how easy it is to do just a little bit better.
Hmm. Yeah, and it is a lot of reframing how you're seeing a situation or thinking about something or taking the time to remind yourself, all right, maybe I just need to get a drink of water and breathe it out for a minute. Just those little things here and there and those little reminders for yourself of you're in it. You gotta, you're in it now, so breathe through it and then we can figure out the next steps once this has calmed down or whatever the situation is.
What's the line from John Mulaney is that if you hate everybody, you need to go to sleep. If you like no, if you hate everybody, you need to eat. If you think everybody hates you, you need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, this thing, like, well, these are fundamental things. It's like we're houseplants with anxiety. We need
Yeah.
fresh air, sunlight, and water.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
if we're not doing those things to ourselves, we will wither and die.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how nice our greenhouse is,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's, you know, we have to take care of ourselves, and that can be as simple as I'm going to make sure that I get my cup of coffee. That's going to
Mhm.
be I'm going to get in bed and read that book
Yeah.
once the kids are asleep. Like, you know, think about the things that give you the biggest return on investment for that joy, for that dopamine,
Yeah.
and center those things. Give yourself permission to center those things in your routine, because self-care isn't selfish,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's actually an investment in yourself to take care of everybody in your family, which, by the way, includes you.
Right. Yeah. And if you're not good, nobody's going to be good.
Nobody's good,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's like leaders eat last, but they still eat. Right?
Yep.
Because a leader who doesn't eat is not a good leader anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. One final question for now, because I feel like we could be talking about 100 other things. So there's a lot happening in the country right now. I'm hearing about people canceling their autism evaluations for their children. And there's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of hullabaloo out there. You have a strong passion when it comes to neurodiversity, and you have an optimistic lens around all of it, and you're very affirming. What hope do you have right now when it comes to the future of neurodivergent kids?
It's a weighty question. And
Yeah.
what I truly believe is the vestiges of any evil movement always come down to, you have to believe me, even though I don't have evidence.
Hmm.
Like, science matters, research matters, community matters. And I don't care how long and loud people on the other side are saying things that aren't true, because the truth does bear out.
Hmm.
And if you need to do the things you need to do right now to take care of yourself, do it.
Hmm.
100%, right? But those communities still exist, and they're there to support you. I will speak directly to all the parents out there who are scared right now, because there's a lot of us.
Hmm.
One of the biggest tools of fascists, and that's right, I'm going to use that word,
Hmm.
is they want to silo us. They want us to feel alone. They want to be the wildebeest at the end of the herd, right? The easy to pick off.
Oh.
Community is what's going to get us through this, right? And those communities include things like diagnostics. They
Hmm.
include things like special education groups. They include things like community support.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's been amazing to see how many autism support groups have rebranded themselves over the last couple of months as board game groups. Do you know I also have an interest in board games, Jen? We could talk about board games while we
Hmm.
are playing board games. And board games is not code for anything. We're just playing Dungeons and Dragons or Settlers of Catan. And by the way, here's how we advocate for our rights at the state government level. Like,
Right.
because fear is a reasonable response, but use actually, sorry, fear and anxiety are reasonable responses to what are happening right now. But anxiety serves to keep us still. Fear
Hmm.
gives us permission to move. So so think back to the beach ball example. When your anxiety keeps us stuck, once the ball is moving, you have permission to move as well. It is scarier, but you're freer.
Yeah.
So the idea here is like, listen, the gauntlet has been thrown,
Hmm.
right? What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Right? And it is a lot of the groups, the conferences that are, they're like, hey, people need us more than ever. It is
Hmm.
scary out there right now.
Yeah.
So we're still meeting, and we're going to offer an online component. We're going to build a bigger table because more people need us right now. So find your table and find the safest way for you to get to it, but don't shut your doors and lock them up, because that's actually how they win, much more so than than what your brain is telling you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking a little bit before recording, but going back to your point about self-care, I think there's so much in the news cycle, and especially around this topic, that it's also okay to put your phone down some days. It's okay
Mhm.
to kind of step away from it a bit and keep trusting your gut of what you know to be true, what you know about yourself or your kids and your family, and to keep doing what you know is right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough though for so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's hard, you're allowed to struggle. I
Yeah.
think one of the things that parents forget a lot is that when things are hard, we're supposed to be fine.
Hmm.
Bullshit,
Yeah.
right? Like when things are hard, we struggle,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And, struggling is not an excuse not to do anything, but it is an acknowledgement that things are a lot harder than we thought they'd be.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, like I said, we could probably talk, all day. But for now, can you tell people where they can find you, how they can connect with you, where they can listen to your podcast, do all the plugs?
Yeah. So yeah, so I have two primary jobs. My therapy practice is the neurodiversitycollective.com. We offer therapy in most of the 50 states, which is great. We also do consulting and advocacy work. So, if you do need to have that conversation with your school district, we're good people to reach out to. If our message of parenting or inclusivity makes sense to your organization, you can reach out to me at drmattzakreski.com. That's the other place we can do that. And our podcast we're through the Geekscape network. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those things, but it's nerding out on neurodiversity. We have a lot of fun with it. I'm chronically online and I have a unique last name. I'm pretty easy to find. But like whatever your entry point is to this, like we'll meet you there and we'll help you get to wherever you need to go. That's our mission.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking about this today. I appreciate it.
Jen, it's always a pleasure.
Hopefully, we'll do it again soon.
Can't wait.
Thank you for listening to the Just My Mom Sense podcast. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Just My Mom Sense, or visit justmymomsense.com for past vlogs and a few of my favorite things. Music produced by Matt Harvey.